Special guest with us here this morning, longtime New York Giants beat reporter, sports writer Patricia Traina joins us on BronxNet's Open. How the holidays treating you, Patricia? Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, so great to see you. I mean, it was, kind of the regular thing for us to be in the press box, but of course, with COVID-19, the pandemic has really changed credentials. So haven't really gotten a chance to see you this year. I know it's been an interesting season for the Giants, not only having to deal with the pandemic, but also just the highs and the lows of this season. What has surprised you the most this year about the Giants?
Well, I think that they came together as quickly as they have. I mean, the defense has been playing really, really well. I mean, the fact that they held the Cleveland Browns last week to 20 points. I mean, I was surprised that they were able to do that. New system, no offseason, no preseason. That's been a surprise. On the flip side, the other surprise is the offense has been very sluggish. I think they've thrown for 9 touchdowns so far, and in what 15 weeks, and that's been a bit of a surprise. I thought Jason Garrett would bring an offense in here that would really be, a juggernaut like what he had down in Dallas. So, one good surprise, one bad surprise, I guess.
We wanted to have you on the show to talk about not only the Giants season, but you've got a new book out, which is really exciting. The Big 50, the New York Giants, the men and moments that made the New York Giants. I know it must be challenging to have a book out during the pandemic, but I believe people are reading more now than ever, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I know I am. I love to read, and I always wanted to write a book. I never thought it would be a Giants book. I thought maybe it would be a novel of some sort, some work of fiction. But when the opportunity came along, I said, "Look, it combines something that I'm very passionate about, which is my covering of the Giants." My reporting of the Giants. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I had a lot of fun with it. And most of all, I learned stuff that I maybe didn't know, and it helps me with my writing, my day-to-day writing and podcasting.
Well, of course. Yeah. And I think it's really beautifully done. I know that Triumph Books has put out a few of these books, including one on the New York Yankees, but you kind of get a chance to do this countdown from 50 to 1 and talk about so many of the great players in Giants history and then also the great moments in Giants history.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, to narrow it down to just 50 and then to stack them in order from number 1 to up to 50. That was just that was probably the hardest part of this entire project, because every man, every moment intertwines with one another, and then you have to go and you have to separate stuff and figure out, okay, where does this place on the scale? And people might disagree with the order that I had the chapters, and then that's fine. It's a discussion point, but that was probably the most challenging part of it.
Very much like the Yankees, Patricia, I think the Giants are, of course, steeped in history when it comes to the NFL, and a lot of connections too here to the Bronx because, you think of some of the great players and coaches, many of which have kind of come from New York City, whether it was the college ranks or, over time, even the Mara family. So talk a little bit about, I think maybe some of the great players that you got a chance to kind of chronicle in this very comprehensive book.
Yeah, some of the players that are covered in this book, unfortunately, they passed, so I didn't get a chance to really, talk to them. But I did do extensive research. You're looking at the Mel Hines, you look at Frank Gifford is touched upon in the book. And then you have some of the guys that are still alive. Harry Carson is in here, Tiki Barber. Um, I have a sidebar on Plaxico Burress. Just, I tried to slant the book a little bit more towards post 1970 because I realize a lot of Giant fans maybe recognize that era, whereas, there's not maybe a lot of people who were alive back in when the Giants were in their infancy. But just in spanning the entire history of the Giants, the guys who were probably, I went for Hall of Famers, I went for Ring of Honor members, I went for guys who basically changed the course of history. Pete Gogolak, for example, was a very instrumental player in changing history. He was at the center of that AFL NFL merger. So just guys like that, and just again learning about that history really, you know, I think filled in a lot of gaps for me personally moving forward, because now I find myself when I'm writing articles, I go back and I say, oh, this relates to 20 some odd years ago or 30 years ago when this happened. So it's really been a great project for me, and I just absolutely, I enjoyed it, and I hope people who read it enjoy it as well.
I think that the generation today, of course, maybe especially the young, really young people here in the Bronx and the city, didn't get a chance to see great players like LT. I think you can make a case not only the greatest player in Giants history, but maybe the greatest player in NFL history.
Absolutely. I mean, any player who changes how the game is played. And, Joe Gibbs had to go and design different offensive schemes to block Lawrence Taylor. Same with Bill Walsh. There's little innovations that we know today, like for example the H back, the two, the double tight end set, and putting a guard on a defensive lineman versus a tackle or whatever. Little nuances that are common in the game today all stem back to how opposing coaches tried to stop Lawrence Taylor. So when you talk about legends who really changed how the game is played, that's a perfect example of someone who, he was just so talented that people had to come up with new ways to slow him down.
I think Giants fans too are excited about the future because they've gotten glimpses this year under new head coach Joe Judge, and I think they're hopeful that Saquon Barkley does return from that injury and maybe is at least as good as he was, if not better, and could eventually become maybe the Hall of Famer that a lot of people think that he could be. Obviously, Saquon has some South Bronx roots here in the Bronx. I was wondering what you thought about that injury and whether or not it could end up derailing his career, or if Saquon could end up being kind of that next great in line and follow someone like a Lawrence Taylor to the Hall of Fame.
Well, first off, that injury was devastating. You never want to see that happen to anybody. I don't care who the player is, what team he's on. That's a devastating injury. And for Saquon Barkley, who, was poised to have a really good year, and now especially you look at how the offensive line has been blocking, run blocking for the most part. They've been doing a good job. You sit there and you wonder what might have been. I do know that Saquon. I spoke to him, I want to say, a couple weeks ago for a podcast, and we talked a little bit about his rehab. He is very determined to come back and be the next Adrian Peterson, who had a similar injury and who, of course, came back strong and and is still going. So Saquon, the advantage he has is that he's still young. He's got access to the best doctors in the world, and he's already been attacking that rehab of his, with full throttle. So my expectation, my hope for him is that he comes back, and next year with this offense in year 2 of the system, I have a feeling Saquon Barkley is just going to absolutely tear it up once he's cleared to go.
That's great to hear. Giants, of course, did have their winning streak without Saquon, and there were moments this season that Daniel Jones really looked like potentially the quarterback of the future. I think the organization and the fan base has embraced the fact that he probably will be here, and I think they are excited to have him. Your thoughts on Daniel Jones and whether or not he can also live up to the expectations that the team has for him?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Jones got off to a little bit of a rocky start, but again, this was year 2 for him and year 1 basically in the new system. So there was a matter of getting comfortable with everything and just, being able to execute without thinking about it too much. But he eventually turned the corner, and then of course we saw the added benefit he brings, which is his running ability, and that's something the Giants have never had. I always equate this to a video game. When they had Eli Manning in here, as great as Eli Manning was, he was not mobile like Daniel Jones is. And when they made the switch to Daniel Jones, I equate that to they leveled up and they unlocked a whole different treasure chest of options and scenarios that maybe they didn't have available to them. So Daniel Jones, he's starting to settle down. He's starting to do a better job taking care of the ball. Unfortunately, what comes with a mobile quarterback is they can be a little bit more injury prone. And Daniel, of course, right now is dealing with the hamstring and the sprained ankles. So hopefully that will heal up. He'll be back on the field before the end of the season, maybe as soon as this week. We don't know as of this recording, but that is the expectation. And Daniel Jones just seems to be slowly turning that corner and on track to being, a solid franchise quarterback for this team.
Well, Patricia, fans can really relive the glory years through your new book. And just again, wanted to recommend everyone at home to check it out. The Big 50 New York Giants, the men and moments that made the New York Giants. It's available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and even TriumphBooks.com. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning.
Thanks for having me. Happy holidays to you.